Hello, everybody, and anybody who happens to be watching. Welcome back to another episode, another story, another chapter. Welcome back to Breaking Bread with Roy, and as always, I'm your host, Roy. So, we're going to kind of get right into it. I'm kind of excited to continue reading here. We left off last time. Joseph, his brothers sold him. They were mad at him. He saw a dream. If you remember back in chapter 37 and 38, he saw a dream that told them that they were going to be submissive to him. They didn't like that much. So while they were out, Father sent him out to go look for him. And what ended up happening? They threw him into a well that was dried up. And Reuben said, no, don't kill him. Judah said, there's some passing, there's a band of passing. We wanted to sell him as a slave instead. So they did. They sold him as a slave into Egypt, and that's where the band was headed to, where they were headed to Egypt. So if you remember, he got sold to the house of a man named Potiphar. And it was 30 pieces of silver, if I remember correctly. But wasn't very much. The point being is however many shekels it was that they sold to him, and so they sold him for, but kind of seems that they were just happy to get rid of him. It didn't seem to matter how much that they were going to get for him. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to get into this. I've been enjoying this story of Joseph for numerous reasons, and I'll tell you why after I get into it. So, not after we get into it, because we've already gotten into it, right? So how about after we finish, I'll give you my reasons as to why I enjoy this story so very much. Chapter 39, we continue in Genesis, and we continue on our journey. And you know what? We're pretty close to the end of Genesis, and I'm looking forward to being the end of Genesis, because that means I've actually completed a full chapter, which I've never actually done before. Read through a full chapter. So for me, that's a milestone for me. And even if nobody else is out there, even if I'm just talking to myself, that's okay, right? Because like I said, I've always said, I'm doing this to hold myself accountable. But if you happen to come along for the ride, thank you very much. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Genesis chapter 39. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, and Egyptian, bought him off the hands of the Ishmaelites which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian Potiphar. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in the sight, and he served him. And he made him an overseer of his house and all that he had put in his hand. So at this point, Potiphar, Joseph has found Joseph found grace with Potiphar. So Potiphar's saying, I really like this guy Joseph. And so Potiphar is now put him in charge and overseeing all of his house. Verse 5, and it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessings of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. So it's all his fields as well, not just his house. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person, and well favored. So it's safe to say that Potiphar really liked Joseph, because he was taking care of things very well. Verse 7, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. And she said, lie with me. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not that is with me in the house, and hath committed all that he hath to my hand. And basically he said, no, I've got too much responsibility in this house. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. But thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened to her, not unto her, to lie by her, and or to be with her. So he's just trying to ignore her, and he doesn't want any part of what she's asking. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do this business. And there was none of the men home in the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. That's for shame. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him. And then now Potiphar's home, and she's telling Potiphar. Well, she's telling him what her version of the story. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. In other words, now he's mad. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. So now Joseph's in prison because of somebody didn't tell the truth. Unfortunate, right? Let's find out what happens here, in case you don't know. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did hear, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it prosper. So basically, and that's the end of 39, but what he's saying is so first, now what happens is Joseph, he gets sold to Potiphar, and, God has blessed him, and he's put him in favor in the eyes of Potiphar, and Potiphar puts him in charge of his house and all of everything in his fields, and everything is prosperous while Joseph is in charge. So Joseph is doing a wonderful job, but somebody didn't like that a Hebrew came into the house. The wife didn't like it, thought of a way to get rid of him, fibbed, didn't tell the truth about what had happened about a scenario inside the house. And so one day when Potiphar comes home, wife tells Potiphar, he came at me and screamed and ran. And so that was, we know that's a lie because we just read that, right? So that was unfortunate, but he goes on, and that's, what ends up happening now is he's in prison, and now he's in favor with the keeper of the prisons. And so now Joseph is in charge of the prison and all the prisoners, and everything's running smooth in the prisons now. So Joseph, God so far has really been looking out for him. And it says so right after, it says there right after, the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, right? So God's been with him. So now he's in prison. So ever since back when he showed that, told his dream to his brothers about how he was going to be, they were going to be not bowing to him, but they were going to be submissive to him in a sense. They didn't like that, right? So that was that dream that he had. So that's kind of what started all this, is that dream that he told him. So that dream got him into trouble. By all accounts, when you read this, you think, man, you can look back and one could say that dream, telling them that dream is what got him in trouble. But we know that's not the case. It wasn't the dream that got him in trouble at all. Joseph's right where he's supposed to be, right? Let's continue reading in chapter 40. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, the wrath being angry, and against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. And they continued a season in ward. So a season, it looks like to me in a season, they continued a season, so it looks like about 3 months at this point. So they're in there, the baker, and the chief baker and the chief butler, they made the Pharaoh really mad, gets sent to prison with Joseph, and Joseph is in charge of them. And they're there 3 months, it seems like at that point, a season. I'm not sure what referencing a season is, but I'm going to speculate. I'm going to speculate it was just a season, 3 months. Verse 5, and they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night. Each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. And Joseph came unto them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief, pause right there, a dream. Joseph has a history with dreams. Okay, if you don't know, let's find out what happens with this one. This is a new, different dream. So the butler and the baker, they had a dream. They told to Joseph. Let's find out what happens. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me. And in the vine were 3 branches, and it was though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters therefore brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. And I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave them the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of it. Now we know right there that God spoke to Joseph and gave him the interpretation of those dreams. It's not that Joseph was wise and knew how to interpret them. God gave him the interpretation, and Joseph just told them. And Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head, and restore thine unto thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner which thou wast his butler. So, in 3 days, the butler is going to go back to work for the Pharaoh. He's going back, and he'll be putting the Pharaoh's cup right back into his hands. And so, that's a very good, it sounds pretty good. It sounds like the butler is going to get his job back, and that's pretty good. But think on me. And he asks them now in verse 14, he says, But think of me when it shall be well with thee, and shew kindness, I pray thee unto me, and make me mention of unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. He's saying, don't forget about me down here, so maybe one day Pharaoh will bring me out of here. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and there also have I done nothing, that they should put me in this dungeon. He says, I've done nothing to be put in this dungeon, but here I am. When the baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was of all manner of the bake meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph, so he's got 3 baskets on his head. The birds are eating the meat out of the very top basket that's on his head. And Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh off of thee. Yeah, that baker is not getting the same treatment that the butler was. It looks like he's not going to have the same fortune. Verse 20, And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again. And he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. Remember, that was in the dream. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. The dreams came true. Pharaoh let out the butler and the baker. The baker died, and the butler got back to work. And just as I said, he put the cup right back into the Pharaoh's hands. And the butler just completely forgot about Joseph, and Joseph is still down there. So, that's kind of bum luck, right? You'd think you got out there, maybe for us common people, regular people. I mean, Joseph was a common guy, I guess, as well. But sitting there thinking, guys, remember, I helped you out here, a little bit of help here, guys, but no such luck. We're going to keep on reading. Chapter 41. I'm really into this one, so I want to make sure we continue on this one. So, let's go. The two dreams of Pharaoh. I think Pharaoh's going to have two dreams now, and that's going to really set things, more dreams. Here we go. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. So I got to pause that one, and I'll actually start it over. So 2 years since the birthday. So this is now 2 years farther. The Pharaoh had his birthday. He killed the baker. He hung the baker and let the butler go. And Joseph is still down there. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed. A kine is, just so you guys know, a kine is a type of cattle. It's a favorable type of cattle. And they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 kine. Lost my place. I'm going to start over on verse 3. I'm sorry. But more specifically, a kine is like a domestic. It's a very specific. It's a domesticated type of bovine, is what that is. So, okay, here we continue. Sorry, lost my place. My apologies. Verse 3, and behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And these lean-fleshed, he's saying that they're very skinny, very lean, as opposed to the fat-fleshed, which are just chunky. They're very well fed, very lean, very fat. So fat-fleshed and lean-fleshed. And stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kind did eat of the 7 well-flavored and fat kind. So the lean ones are eating the fat ones. And Pharaoh woke up. So that's where he wakes up, after they're sitting on the banks, and these lean bovine or these lean kine are eating the fat flesh. And he slept and dreamed the second time, and behold, 7 ears of corn stood up from one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 ranks and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. So Pharaoh has this dream about the kine, and then he's got these about the ears of corn that come up out of one stalk, and he's not able to figure out what's going on here. So he calls everybody that's of any kind of wisdom, supposedly, in his kingdom, and he says, hey, somebody, you need to tell me what's going on here. Tell me what's going on here. Nobody's able to tell him anything. They don't have an idea. Why? Why don't they know? Well, because only God can give the interpretations of those dreams that they're looking for. And so let's continue. Verse 9. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in a ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he. We dreamed each man, according to the interpretations of his dream. There was with us a young man, a Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. So he's saying, hey, I remember this guy. We have these dreams. He told us about these dreams. I'm back to work, and the baker was not. Okay, so he finally remembered Joseph. Whether he remembered his name or not, but he said, hey, there was this Hebrew when we were in prison. Verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself, and changed his raiment, and came unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, very important right here, it is not me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. So right there, Joseph gave God the credit, saying, this isn't coming from me. I'm not the one who interprets it. This is God doing this for you. God is just using me to interpret it, and I'm happen to be the vessel that's giving the interpretation. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood up upon the bank river. Remember the kind? We're going to repeat that part. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored and lean-fleshed, such as I had never saw in the land of all Egypt for badness. And the lean and the ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And they had eaten them up. It could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored and in the beginning. So I awoke. And I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in the one stalk. Remember now, it's a second dream now about the stalks. Verse 22, and I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears withered thin, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears, and I told unto the magicians, but there was none who could declare it to me. So he just basically, right now, he just repeated his dreams to Joseph, and he just let him know, he said, I told all my magicians. Nobody could figure it out. Verse 25, and Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. 2 separate dreams, but it's basically one story. It's one dream, he's saying. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the lands of Egypt. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. So he repeated that, and he just basically told him, he said 7 years of plentiful crops, 7 years of famine to follow that, and the famine will consume, it'll completely consume the land of Egypt. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of the famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, it is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. It's going to happen soon. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the fifth part of the land of Egypt in 7 plenteous years. And let them gather all the food, those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep the food in the city. So he's basically saying is just for those first 7 years, start collecting as much food as you can. Keep it, save it, assign somebody to make sure that that food is being collected. And the food shall be for store for the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, and the land perish not through the famine. Save the food, collect it, store it up so that when we are in famine, we don't starve to death. Verse 37, and the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. They all agreed. They all said, okay, this is good. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one of this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, forasmuch as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. Whoa. It just keeps getting better for him. Good, bad, good, bad. So now, basically, Pharaoh just put Joseph second in charge of all the land. The only person, he said, in the land that is greater than him is Pharaoh. That's it. So Joseph is now second in command to Pharaoh, because God showed favor on Joseph and was able to help him interpret those dreams. And Pharaoh was very pleased. Good job, Joseph. Wow, way to go. Way to be listening, right? Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto the word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it on Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures and fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck. Vestures is clothing, fine clothing. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, bowed the knee, and he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh. Without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah, and he gave him wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went all over the land of Egypt. So Pharaoh was now endowing Joseph with everything he could possibly want. Everything. And he even gave him a wife, Asenath, who was the daughter of Potiphar. So Joseph, I'm not going to say Joseph has everything he wanted, but Joseph has more than he ever had before, right? At this point. So it's good on him. So let's continue reading and see what else happens here in the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and went throughout the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years of the earth brought forth by handfuls, and he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the foot in the cities, and the food of the field which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much, until he's numbering, for it was without number. He's saying basically, because of those 7 years of plentiful crops, they were able to store so much corn that there's no way they could have possibly counted how much they had. It was that plentiful. They had entirely way more. It was without number is what the last was. For it was without number. So they just didn't have a way of truly figuring that part out. Verse 50. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For God, said he, hath made me forget all my turmoil, and all my father's house. And the name of the second called him Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. In verse 53. And the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended. So the 7 years over. Joseph is now 37. We're going to try to stick with the math. I'm trying to stick with that, and I do that in my head so that I can try to stay with, and so we know after 7, if he's 37 now, that's going to make him 44 after the 7 years of famine. Okay, had to do the math on that one. Let's continue. And the 7 years of plenteousness was in the land of Egypt were ended. And the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph he said. And the dearth was in all the lands, but in the land of Egypt there was bread. So everybody else there was famine. But in Egypt, there wasn't. No famine in Egypt, but everywhere else surrounding. My guess is at this point they're going to have to come to Egypt if they want anything. Because remember, they said they have so much that was unable to measure, or they were unable to be able to tell the amount. So I have a feeling everybody's going to come to Egypt now. And yep, there we go. So verse 55. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph. What he saith to you, do. And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses, and sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all the countries came into Egypt to Joseph to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in the lands. That's the end of chapter 41. So, yeah, it looks like that's about right, And they said, the famine was all over the face of the earth. All over the face of the earth, all over the face of the earth. So, but not there in Egypt. And you know what? All the countries, they came to Egypt for Joseph. All of the countries, everywhere. So they listened, and that's very, very fortunate. So basically what happened there, if we remember, so Pharaoh listened to Joseph. And it was a really good thing he did too, because, it was one of those times that you had to be sure you listen when the time is right, I guess. Sometimes we listen and sometimes we don't. It's a good thing that the Pharaoh listened. He could have been very stubborn. But he decided to listen to Joseph. But God knew what he was doing, right? He knew that he knew Pharaoh was going to listen. And so that's why God put Joseph in that situation. And at this point, I don't think Joseph is suffering anymore. Of course, then I don't know that, but it just seems that everything's gone well for him. It's what it seems, right? But we don't want to make any assumptions as to what Joseph's thinking. But at this point, on text, everything is well. We're going to leave that right there, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pretty good story. We got a lot more to go, but I wanted to take a pause right there. We'll continue this, and I'm actually going to make another video in a little bit. It's easier to do since I don't do a whole lot of editing. I don't know how, really. So, no major editing. Maybe at some point I'll figure out some editing, and maybe these videos will be a little bit cooler. But if I'm the only one watching them, I guess it really doesn't matter, right? So, and some of you might even ask, if you're doing this for yourself, why are you even talking? Like if people are listening. Well, that's just in case people do listen. But one of the things I learned when I was in college, and I'll share this a little bit with you, and this is what I teach my kids too. When I was going through college, some of these subjects that I had the hardest time in, one of them happened to be anatomy, and one of the hardest things that I did was try to get through some of the physiology of anatomy. But I got through it. I would go through my classes, and then I would go into a library somewhere, wherever I had space. Well, wherever I had space or privacy, for that matter, and I would pretend as if I was teaching that subject to a class. And so what that did was it helped me remember, and it helped bring things back. And I would do this right away. I didn't wait necessarily. If I could go leave my anatomy class and go right to the library, we had these cubicles that were big enough different. There were various sizes, but they were glass rooms, and they had various sizes. You could sit 4 people, or you could fit 12 people. But I would go in there and I would pretend as though I was teaching it, and I would have my whiteboard, and I would turn and I would write things on the whiteboard, and I would erase. And so I was going through it as if I was teaching. So that made it so much easier for me to remember, to put things in perspective that I might have missed before. Because sometimes I have these pieces. I have this piece, I have this piece, and this piece. And then when I'm actually teaching it, right, then all of a sudden those 3 pieces, they end up coming together. And let's just say I did really well in anatomy. I did very, very well in anatomy. So much better than I ever would have had I not picked up that. But that was something that somebody taught me. So I remember the Bible more when I do the same thing. If I can go through and pretend as if I'm talking to somebody out there, whether I'm the only one or not, at the very least, I'm explaining it to myself in a way that I will always remember. And hopefully, if there's anybody out there actually watching this one, that you'll remember it just the same. So any of you that are out there, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you listening. I hope that you're getting something out of it. Feel free. Let me know if you are. If you're not, I apologize. I could try things that are different, but leave me a comment if you would. I don't mind. If you want to like it, you want to subscribe. We've got so many chapters and so many more books to go. So if you want to stay and you want to follow along with me, I appreciate it. I think that would be great. But, this is mostly something for myself to really get through and make sure. But, I'm always happy. If this is motivating to you in any way, shape, or form, I think that's great. And it's fantastic. And, God works in each and every one of us in different ways. And if I can motivate just one person, I think that's cool. I'm good with that. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, come before you in all humble and in all humbleness, Lord, and realizing how much how much learning is ahead of us, Lord, and is ahead of me, and in this process of going through the Bible. And Lord, I ask for the constant conviction to remember to sit down and read every day, Father. And I ask for the ability to understand each and every day what we read, and that I can actually take it in. And even though I'm talking to myself, or even though I could be talking to myself, Father, that somebody, maybe at least one person, maybe if just one person is able to catch on, Father, then I've done something right, then I've done something good, and hopefully it's good in your eyes, Heavenly Father. So, Lord, I ask you to use each and every one of us as a witness to you in any way, shape, or form that you see fit, Father. We surrender ourselves to you. And if it's just something as simple as reading the Bible on the internet, Father, Lord, I come to you in humility and grace, Lord, that I appreciate everything that you're doing for me. We ask, Heavenly Father, that you stay with us, stay in our hearts, Heavenly Father, and give us that motivation each and every day. Amen. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Please like and subscribe if you choose to do so. That's cool. And look forward. We're going to continue our story with Joseph. There's still a lot more to it. I think it's probably, I'm not positive if I remember, it's about 2 or 3 more chapters. So we've got some more to do. Stay tuned. I'm going to be recording again a little bit later today. I may not be posting it on the same day, but I will be recording it. We're almost to the end of Genesis now. We are very, very close here. And if I remember correctly, there's 47 and 48, 49, 50. Okay, so we've got a few more. So 50, so we got 8 more chapters, guys, and we got a couple more days of this. I think we got this in 4 days. 2 more days, 4 chapters and 4 chapters. I think we're just about done with the Genesis, and so this has been a really good start, and so I appreciate each and every one of you for joining me. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. We'll see you on the next episode when we start chapter 42.